Thanks for joining us for this episode. And before we get started, I do want to let you know about the upcoming Church Advance Conference beginning February 8th. Now, it's hard to believe it's already 2023, and this conference is coming up very soon. So if you haven't registered yet, you're going to want to make sure that you do that as soon as possible because space is limited. You can register at briansams.com, and you can get a discount if you use the code podcast when you go to register and purchase your tickets for this event. This is an awesome opportunity to enjoy powerful preaching from H.B. Charles, Kurt Skelly, Carrie Schmidt, and of course, Brian Sams. There are also some really practical workshops. And being in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida in February is pretty awesome because the weather is fantastic. You are not going to want to miss this year's Church Advance Conference 2023, and we look forward to seeing you there. Again, remember to register at briansams.com. Use that promo code podcast to get a discount. That's briansams.com, promo code podcast. Now, we are going to get started with the main content of today's episode, where we are, of course, looking to continue to advance a reformation, a fellowship, partnership, and gospel hope amongst Bible-believing churches and pastors. This is Church Advance with Brian Sams.
Today, I am rejoined by our former co-host, Aaron Chan. Aaron, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Chan, look, here's the deal, man. I mean, you are now so busy and so...
We talking about pastors only work one day a week.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And Chan, I mean, you know, here's the deal. You're big time now. You're the big dog. You're lead pastor now. So, thanks for making time, man. Really, that's what I was.
I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. Well, Chan, here we go. We're recording this in December 2022. You're about 8 weeks away from launching your church. You're having Bible studies right now. Just tell me a little bit about how's it going, man. What's the plan?
Yeah, we've been having a great few weeks. We've been there since August, just kind of doing Bible studies. Just finished the Book of Romans. And now we're going to dive into the book of John come the start of the new year, which is going to be great. We've been having between 15 and 20 people each Sunday, which has been great. Several repeat guests. A man this past week told me he wanted to join. That's been coming for a few weeks now. I had Assemblies of God visitor that was brought by her sister-in-law, who's a member, and hoping to be able to talk to her more about salvation and working on her. And so hopefully we'll be seeing some people saved and baptized. My wife has also been leading a children's Sunday school every other week, and we believe that all 4 or 5 of those girls are not saved. So pray that, hey, let's get them saved and get them baptized. It's going to be awesome. So, yeah, we're 8 weeks out from the grand opening, February 19th. We will be launching the grand opening in our auditorium after the renovations are all done. So February 19th is going to be the big day.
Yeah, it's super exciting. We're going to do a weekend where it's like a carnival family atmosphere. Mm-hmm. What is that called?
The block party.
Block party, yeah. That's on Saturday, and then, of course, service on Sunday. And for those of you listening, I want to encourage you, man, if you want to help out Aaron, we are raising some resources. Where are we at, about $12,000?
Yeah, $12,000 left. We started with a goal of $63,000 for year one, and we are at right around 12 to 13. So, if you're listening, I will never say no to money. So,
yeah. And basically, what it is the $64,000 is to operate the church for the first year.
Yes.
And obviously, a lot of that's River City doing most of the work there, which is great. But some of it just helps us to purchase chairs and other things to get the auditorium renovated. If you want to help out, you can contact with Aaron based on the show notes. And most of you already probably have Aaron's contact, but reach out to me if you need to. Got any questions? I know we're looking forward to being at the Idea Summit here in January, and so hopefully maybe some of you are coming to the Kingdom Advancement Lunch, which Aaron's part of, which is awesome. But help us get across the finish line, man. We're getting a church getting started, a God thing, a building given to us, and Hope Church is on the way, and so pray with us about that as well. Well, Aaron, today, in light of that idea of what you're doing, you said something to me At some point, you said that you had thought about maybe starting a podcast called The Reluctant Pastor.
Yeah.
And I laughed. I thought, well, that might be a good podcast at some point. But for now, I want to just kind of dial in on that subject for a minute. And the reluctant pastor, you kind of called yourself a reluctant pastor. What does that even mean?
I think I speak for a lot of guys. I think so here's my background. So I grew up in a Christian home, typically, quiet, not outgoing. You're super popular individual, type B personality for the most part. And when I went to Bible college, I just, I majored in secondary education. I just always did not see myself as a senior pastor. There, without a doubt, a lot of guys that go to Bible college and they major in pastoral theology or something, and they know that this is what I'm going to do. And I think a lot of guys go to Bible college and they think, no, I probably will never do that. I'll probably be more of a teacher or assistant or something else, And the past year or so, I found myself looking on Facebook and seeing stories from several guys. One that stands out in my mind, I'm not going to say his name or anything, but I saw his story on Facebook. He said, I never thought I would be a senior pastor, and yet here I am. He's like a year or two in or something. And this past year, I just found myself thinking, we've been here in Jacksonville at River City Baptist Church for 6 years now, going on 6 years. And I feel like, God, there might be something else that you want me to do. And I don't know exactly what this feeling is. And the term reluctant is maybe there could be a better term used, but reluctant, maybe the sense that this could be something that I actually can do now. Now, serving under you, being mentored by you for the past several years, I'm like, I think this is something that I might enjoy doing. And so coming to that revelation this past year is kind of brought to me the phrase reluctant pastor. I think there's probably a lot of guys out there that feel the same way. Oh, I could never be a senior pastor, or that's not my calling. Well, it may well could be in a couple of years.
So you're saying it's not like you had the youth conference moment where you stood up and left the youth conference thinking, I'm going to pastor a church of 1,000.
Right.
Right. You were willing. I want to serve the Lord, obviously, with my life. But when you started looking at typical stereotype of pastor, you just weren't seeing yourself there.
Yeah, you look at, and you were in the same environment. You go and the Bible college that I was at, that you taught at, but there was this typical preacher boy persona, and and I just didn't see myself as that type of person. But the more I am shoulder to shoulder with just your average laborer, I'm just like, there's not a cookie cutter pastor type. There is absolutely style differences, but God uses personality types of all different kinds. It just depends on, are you called? Is God calling you? Do you have that burden? Do you desire to reach people with the gospel of Christ in the capacity of the senior pastor? So that's basically the kind of my mental journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said to me, we were working at the Mayport campus a couple of weeks ago, and you said, one of the things that I struggle with is like I look at this calling and I struggle because I'm not like you. You were talking to me directly. And my answer was, well, yeah, but that's actually probably a really good thing because not everybody likes me. I mean, I know that's a shock, but as it relates to what people want to hear in preaching or what people want to experience in talking to a ministry person, the dynamic, robust, absolutely clear and certain sergeant, me, okay, is not always great. I mean, I know for a fact that multiple members of this church tremendously admire you and have grown to love you, including Luella, who just passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a specific thing mentioned to me as I talked to their family, that you specifically were somebody that she really appreciated. Well, that's pastoring. My gifts are not the greatest at what some people call pastoral care, but yours are better. And not only that, stylistically and in depth, everybody recognizes that your teaching gift is there. It's not the same, but it's definitely there. So you just, different is not bad. Different is necessary. And I think, if I were encouraging a reluctant pastor out there, I would say the very first and foremost thing is break the stereotype and reduce this to the call. So let me talk about that for a minute. The call. You had mentioned what I think is the first and essential part of the call, the internal call. God works in you to will and to do his good pleasure. Every man called of God to pastor, preach, missions has an internal call. It's clear. The second part is the overlooked part, and this is where a ministry breakdown occurs. This is where yours probably broke down. No disrespect to anybody involved, but this is where yours probably ultimately broke down. And that would be you had no external call. So I've talked about this some, I think, on the podcast and certainly in ministry training settings, but internal call is God working in you. External call is God working in the church to confirm the internal call, leading to ultimately ordination. That's what, Paul says, neglect not the gift that is in you, which was given you by the laying on of the hands of the presbytery. What? The symbolic recognition of God's hand on a person is the laying on of the hands. That's what it means. So in Acts 13, Paul and Barnabas were dedicated to the work. The Holy Spirit called them. The church recognized that call, laid on their hands on them symbolically, and sent them away. It's ordination. You were the typical guy who says, I'm called to preach, and you're shuffled to the nearest Bible college. And then there was really no local church affirmation of that call. Then you come here to work on staff. And over the course of 7 years, the affirmation came clearly. I mean, it was within a couple of years that I think at Starbucks one time said to you, I don't know, man, I'm starting to sense that maybe I could see you doing this. In fact, I think at the time I said, I wonder if you might replace me. We're not in that zone yet here. I'm only 44, but I did have that thought cross my mind that I can see that. I can see the teaching. I can see the demonstrative care for people and wisdom with people and just the general knowledge of church workings. And certainly the gift of teaching is there. So that's me coming alongside of you and together seeing it. I like that. I think that organic laboratory of the local church is a better setting to call that. So what would you say what are maybe some of the top things that you would say made you reluctant as we're defining it?
Yeah, I think we've hit it on it majorly already, is the style, the stereotypical style of the preacher. The second thing was, surprisingly, I'm just like, well, this is not my degree is not in this, which I don't, at this point right now, we realize, no, you don't need a degree in preaching or pastoral, my degree is in secondary education. Okay. Have I even used that to its full? No, I've never, no. In fact, I hate mathematics now. I hate it. But that was an obstacle too. And then I guess the major one was, getting the stereotype out of my mind. Like, no, this is not what all pastors are supposed to be formed into. This, God uses all different kinds of pastors, would be the major one. Let's see, other ones. I don't know if I can think of any other ones.
So you got stereotype basically. You have training.
Yeah.
Like so my picture of what a pastor was, more dynamic, more robust, more commandeering or whatever. Secondly, my training didn't match. And I think, again, all of those ironed itself out in time. The reluctant pastor is not going to get a call in a moment, more than likely. It's going to be in time,
right,
surrendering to the Lord and so on and so forth. And so that is I think a good visual for the guy out there that's feeling the same way. And I would say in a caution on the other end, like if you think that your personality or style or
yeah.
training is the answer, you're completely mistaken. I mean, I'm much more dangerous than you are. Personally, I'm just a dangerous person. The dangerous calling. I mean, I have the gifts and the personality and the multiplied training on paper. Somebody's going to go, oh man, he's ready. Well, yeah, but I can also become like Samson. Samson wist not that the spirit departed from him. I mean, he's lying in Delilah's lap, getting his hair cut like a moron, doesn't even realize that his power's faded. I think the reluctant pastor has an advantage because he's more consciously aware of his need for the Holy Spirit's enablement, whereas the professional, trained, polished pastor can rely on this is what Samson did. He relied on his gifts more than God.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm like, man, I wish I was a reluctant pastor because I think I'd be more conscious. Now I think in time I've come obvious. I mean, mentally and spiritually, I know I'm not stupid. I know enough to know I need God. But listen, when I can, if you stopped right now and said, Brian, hey, the Jacksonville Jaguars just called, and at halftime, let's say they're playing today, they want you to preach. Man, I'd be in the car so fast you wouldn't know it hit you, and I would go do it and not even think about it. I mean, I'd be pumped. You'd probably have a heart attack.
I'd be like, oh, what am I what are we doing?
I mean, literally, I would be down there so fast you wouldn't know it hit you, and I'd be pumped to stand in front of 60,000 people and preach the gospel without any thought. I could just open up John and start talking, and that's great. That's awesome. There's some real great advantages to it, but there's some scary things to it as well. So I think the reluctant mindset, the reluctant pastor mindset, even if you're not, should be more prevalent and be there. So now, kind of finally, what are how are you compensating? Like, what ways do you feel like I'm taking steps toward settling in the call, moving forward with who I am?
Number one is find yourself a good mentor. That is number one. Of course, you're my number one mentor. So,
Sweet.
There you go. Yeah. If you do not, if you're in a church, right, and if you're listening to this and you're in a church and you have, you've sensed this calling and you're in a secular vocation right now, and your pastor, unfortunately, either doesn't have the time or maybe the ability to bring you along and grow you in this calling, then I would do a little bit of searching, like find out, okay, I've got this calling, what do I do with it? If my home pastor cannot help me, then who's somebody that can?
Absolutely.
Find yourself a mentor that can. Ask for opportunities to preach and teach in your church. Sunday mornings are not going to probably be the first thing that you get to do, but you ought to be serving somewhere in your church in a teaching capacity. If indeed the pastoring call is something in your life, then you need to be able to exercise that gift, hone it, get better at it, watch some videos, podcasts, read some books about communication, things like that, because that can be taught, as if you told me in the past. What are some other things? Get involved with just about every ministry you can, too. I was teaching this last night, as of this recording. Our lesson on Wednesday night is serving. And one of the key points that Tony Merida makes in his book, Love Your Church, is this. Although you have a primary ministry in which you serve and that you're involved with every week, you should also be mindful of areas that you're not particularly spiritually gifted and serve occasionally. So the example that I used was, look, some of you may not be interested or really great in children's ministry, but what we have every year is an Easter egg hunt. And what always needs extra volunteers? The Easter egg hunt. And so while children's ministry may not be your primary gifting, you can always help on that one event every single year. Exercise some love, some charity for something that you're not comfortable with. And the more areas that you do that with, especially as a church planter or as a pastor, there's so many things that I've learned here in the past 6 years that I've had to just open up a book or watch a YouTube video. How do I figure this out? Like 6 years ago, how do I build a sound system with zero knowledge? Okay, you're going to have to do that if you're going to be a pastor of a church that has less than 100 people in it, because I guarantee you there's probably going to not be a sound system there, or one that many churches would have thrown away 20 years ago. So Yeah, so those are three things that I think.
Yeah, and so I think to just wrap that, I think it's good because not only will you need to have the knowledge yourself, likely. I mean, the guy I was coaching yesterday, pastor to 80 people, only staff member.
Yep.
And there he is. There he is, probably cutting the grass, folding the bulletins, all that. And then I think so you need to just generally know that. But then secondly, I think you also, it's going to be empathetic and knowing what you're looking for as you're raising up and training volunteers.
Yeah, then you can impart the knowledge that you have to them and you can develop them. Yeah.
Exactly. I think those are all super, super good. I would even say beyond just learning the skill of teaching and preaching, mentoring, I would say even just, pick up all the invaluable resources out there. If you do not learn how to be a preacher or a church leader in this culture, it's because you don't want to learn. I mean, dude, there are so many podcasts, books, sermons, resources out there, not to mention guys who, if you just pick up the phone and call them, will be glad to help more than likely.
Yeah.
We have no excuse, man. You can grow into anything. I've had to grow in administration. I don't like it. It doesn't give me life. But, I mean, here I'm leading a church through a major operation right now, going to 2 services, moving small groups to Wednesdays.
Planting 2 churches.
I mean, look, man, I better have my head out of my rear end if I'm going to expect to get anything done. Well, how do I execute? How do I prioritize? How do I execute? I'm behind a little bit this week. I got to get my act together, okay? But I got to know how to look at the big, broad picture and attack and knock down the to-do list as fast as I can. And how do you even make one if you don't know what you're doing? So I think just being a self-learner, man, don't look, guys, the last thing in the world you probably need to do right now is go get a seminary degree. I would highly advise against it if you don't have clarity on your reason for it.
Yeah.
The only way I finished my doctorate was because I had a clear vision for why I wanted it. And it's the only thing that kept me going.
Yep.
Not to mention how much of it is useful today.
Yeah.
Probably not much.
Your average church member is not going to give a rip about whether or not you have an MDiv after your name, but they will care how you care for them.
Now, if you have a specific deficiency in Bible knowledge or theology, sure.
Yeah.
But even then, there's ways to get it. And I mean, I'm a college professor, so I advocate for further education. But what I'm saying specifically in this conversation is that might not be the answer to your immediate need. It might be grabbing 2 or 3 skills, grabbing a mentor, improving your preaching and teaching, getting involved more, and creating a pathway toward ministry. And I think that's helpful. By the way, the only way that a pastor, at least in my role, would look around and identify, train up, and send out a leader is because they are involved in all those things.
Yes.
I'm not going to send away people who are duds, essentially. So that's awesome, man. Well, hey, I appreciate your openness about this. I think it'll help somebody that's in your shoes. Please reach out to Aaron, and he's the guy that can help you, I think, with this.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode, and please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really love it if you take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and then share this podcast with your fellow church leaders or pastor friends. If you'd like to connect with us, send us a question, learn more about Church Advance, head over to briansams.com. That's briansams.com. This podcast is hosted by Brian Sams and produced by myself, Luke Clayton, and my team at mustangcrease.com. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you join us in the next episode as we continue to advance the fellowship, partnership, and gospel hope amongst Bible-believing pastors and churches right here on Church Advance with Brian Sams.